EM Weekly starting right now, bringing emergency managers from around the world together to learn, share and collaborate.
Good morning. Hey, everybody. This is Todd and John, your host of the EM Weekly Show. And today, yes, we are broadcasting during the EM student time and for a couple different reasons. And one is Dan will not be here with us today. He's out. So we brought in a pinch hitter quickly this morning, and his name is John Scardina. And he has his own podcast. We'll talk about that in a minute. John, welcome to the EM student / EM Weekly Show.
Hey, Todd. Thanks for having me on.
No problem. So, first of all, Dan, I know you're listening, and missed your face, man, this morning. It's your big fuzzy face and your cheery smile. But we'll have you back, obviously, on your next show. And everybody here misses you too, Dan. So, John, well, welcome to the show. And it's going to be a fast one. Not a fast one necessarily, but a lot of topic. We're going to be talking about 2020, the year in review. And, oh, my God. It ends. It's ending. 2020 is ending tomorrow night.
I know, right? The year of years is that finally over. Oh my gosh.
I remember when I was a kid, years seemed to go really slow, and it seemed like this year they're doing super slow, and it's finally over.
Oh, that's funny that you're saying. I mean, this year's flown by for me, and then on top of everything else, I had a baby this year. So
COVID baby.
This year has just been going, man. So yeah.
Yeah, well, congratulations on the baby and everything, and hey, at least you get to stay home a little bit more with him, and her. What, a boy or girl?
Yeah.
Forget.
It's a girl. Yeah,
that's right.
Her name is Millie. So
girls are great, and you know why girls have so small fingers, right?
No,
it's easier to wrap their daddies around them. So
I like that. I like that a lot, man. She gets my attention. I have a boy and a girl now. And 2 under 2, and oh my gosh, like it's pure love when I go back into that house, and it's a lot of fun. So
that is a lot of fun, and wow, 2 under 2, that is, you guys are crazy, but that's okay. It's all right.
In COVID, 2 under 2, yeah.
So 2020, kind of started off with craziness, right? I mean, worldwide, we're talking. Australia was burning in December, moved into January. And we thought that was going to be, the big story of the year, right? I mean, it was an amazing fire. I mean, I forgot how many acres it burned, but it was almost more than some size of some countries over there. And it looks like they're dry again this year. But so we thought that was going to be the story. Yet China had a different plan, and COVID comes out, or the novel coronavirus comes out, which later has been determined to be COVID-19, which is a variant of the SARS virus. And so we're dealing with that. And here in California, we are dealing, in New York too, and a couple other places, we're dealing with our second wave, or a wave within a wave, as some people are saying. And it doesn't seem like it's going away anytime soon. Let's start with COVID. How has that impacted emergency management, you think, this year?
Yeah, so that's a great question, because pretty much everybody that I've brought on who's doing response, that's like obviously like the prime question. It's like, how has it changed your response? And I think the big thing is how you deal with survivors and sheltering. You can't do conjugate sheltering anymore. You can't do these mass shelters. And so in California, for example, in the wildfires in August, they had 160 hotels that they were trying to use to put survivors in, and they weren't putting any more than 5 survivors in a hotel. So that's just like mind-boggling, the logistics of trying to figure out how to feed people where they're at, try to get them through paperwork, even if they need a grant or if they need assistance from FEMA. And so it just becomes like the complexity of how to help survivors, and then how to make sure that the responders don't get sick in the meantime. It just becomes a logistical cluster, essentially. So that would be my big call out.
What I also found interesting too is a lot of our EOCs this year were run virtually. Not a lot opened up their doors because of fear of COVID. And then the other thing too, what I found interesting is people were finding unique ways to use technology that wasn't your traditional box on, big money incident management software. They're using things like Slack and Teams and Zoom and so it was kind of interesting to see looking at things like on LinkedIn and talking to people who are doing unique ways of budget friendly incident management software, if you will, for lack of a better term, using different things like that. What do you think of that part of it?
Well, so I asked Tim Britt, who he and I served on the national team together, the National IMET West at the time, National IMET Red now. I said, hey, if you had to do another one of these, what would it look like? Because if we're talking about, like, let's say if there was another sea burning event and they had to do 100% virtual, and he was talking about how to set up objectives and timelines very quickly. I mean, we always talk about an emergency management communication. That's always like the standard AAR, right? The after action report. But I think this time it became so much more critical to say at noon every day, this is when we're talking. We're talking, we're going to do our ops periods. They have to be absolutely perfect. And you, to your point, you're talking about the EOCs. More EOCs were activated this year than ever before. And you had Florida go down. That made the news. I believe during Hurricane Laura, we had the massive problem with COVID and responders down there in Louisiana. And so, like, they had to force themselves to work in these austere environments that, quite frankly, whether the budget wasn't there beforehand or the amount of personnel weren't there beforehand, like, there was a huge learning curve of how to use really simple things. And then the last part of that would be, it's so funny when you talk to emergency managers, sometimes they get into this like hyper, like, oh, everything's really sensitive. Like, no, most people don't care that, like the incident size. Like I would talk to people and, like, I can't show them how many counties were impacted by the incident. I'm like, that's on CNN, dude. Like, that's not sensitive information. And so I think this year really forced people to say, okay, here's a security issue. Here's like a PII, a personal identifiable information issue. And then here's just like your quick need to know, send out a quick test message, get people rolling. I mean, it's just been totally changing our mindset too of how we focus on, the response. I mean, what do you think? I mean, you're talking about technology, but you're like the technology guru over there. You're doing live, you're doing all this stuff. I mean, it's amazing. So you can do training on it. Yeah.
Well, thank you. Hang on. Oh, you got me laughing. I had to cough a little bit.
That's the goal.
Yeah, no, I think that when we start taking a look at technology and the stuff that's out there, I mean, there is no reason at this, unless like you lose complete power or the what is it, what is the one on the sunblast, the corona mass ejection?
Oh, the mass ejection, the EMP.
The EMP, we're under that type of stuff, unless you lose power completely, or whatever. And even that, I mean, like, if you have backup power, you can still run most of the software. I mean, there are things like I said, like using Slack or Jira or Airtable or any of these things that are out there that you can do collaboration tools, Dropbox Paper, Google Documents. I mean, there's all this stuff that's out there that you can, I'm talking about people that are on a budget. You can do this, or if you have the money to spend, I mean, using I'm not going to put out ads from anybody right now, but you can use the expensive stuff if you want, which works really well too. But it's about having processes and systems in place. Like you're saying, if you're going to do Zoom meetings, right, or team meetings, whatever you're using, say noon. Everybody's going to meet at this time, or every hour, or because the nice thing about Teams and Zoom is that you can do breakout rooms, so you can have your planning section in its own room. You can have your operations section in their own room. Then you can come together in a main room. So things like this that are I think seeing that working out. I mean, oddly enough, years ago, at the community college I was teaching at, they created a virtual EOC for training purposes, all the way up to having desks. You could pull folders out and PDF stuff. So stuff that's been around for a bit. Just people didn't embrace it because they thought it was never going to be used. And lo and behold, here we are using virtual EOCs, and people are scrambling.
Well,
go ahead.
Yeah, it's so funny to me because I remember, which disaster was it? Maybe I always talk about Hurricane Harvey. I talk about it too much, but during Hurricane Harvey, we had 26,000 federal responders. And when I was on the national team, I had switched over from operations to more of like a geospatial intelligence role. And in fact, I was in charge of geospatial intelligence. And everybody wanted their paper maps. And I understand the value of drawing on your paper maps, but it drove me nuts. I'm like, I could just have an intern or FEMA Corps. The FEMA Corps drives them crazy if I call them interns. But if I have the FEMA Corps just say, hey, let's just pump this out to everybody digitally, not just email, but like if we could get like it on the TV screens and we could, send it out to the field locations like that way, we could get situational awareness so much higher. And I think that's really the end goal of what we're getting to here is you always want to have that face-to-face. You want to be able to read people. Emergency managers, it's kind of a misnomer, that name, right? It's more of an emergency coordinator.
Yeah.
But like at the end of the day, if the faster you can get a great situational awareness and start getting ahead, I mean, it'll create a snowball when you start to get behind. And I think one of the biggest hindrances is our field. We're traditionalists. Hey, we come from, these backgrounds and we want to have, our set. Okay, we always got to follow ICS. We always got to follow technology. We always got to follow like these same processes. And COVID, the horrible silver lining, I guess you could say, is that it's forcing us to say, okay, what's most important? How do we get the information the fastest? How do we help people the fastest, especially when there's logistical errors or complexities?
Craig Fouquet loves to talk about the fact of the ICS purists, and it kind of drives him crazy. But yeah, I mean, I think ICS is a tool, and it can be used, but sometimes we have to, excuse me, massage that a little bit. You know what I mean? To make it work for what we're doing.
It's a guideline, not a rule.
Absolutely. And I have to, we have my sponsor, Titan HST, back here. One of the things that they have, which I think is really cool, is on their maps. You could actually, for situational awareness, you could drop pins on the maps, and it's on your phone, right? So even if you're not sitting at the EOC, you can see where everything is happening just by a quick glance on the map and see where all the situations are going on. I mean, and then Johns Hopkins, they used the COVID map, like it's a beautiful tool, and I think it's I want to say it was an Esri board that they were using.
It is.
Yeah. I mean, like that's another tool too. Esri is an amazing company.
We so the Disaster Tough podcast is actually owned by Doberman Emergency Management, the company that like the small business that I run, and using some of that GIS skills, we actually on our website we have a SIT board for COVID, and we embedded Johns Hopkins data. And as a guy who appreciates data, man, I cannot it is the best thing that I've ever seen. I mean, you can click on all these different boards, you can see the growth rate, you can see these waves, you can look at the data, and if you take opinion out of emergency management and you really start to figure out an analytical response, combining that with experience, I think that's when these guys are guys and girls out in the field are really able to hit hard, because they're able to say like, hey, this isn't just like, oh, I think the volcano's going to go. Like, hey, we're using some data here. You should probably get off the mountain, Right. And I think that validates us moving forward too. But it's not a perfect science either. So I guess like my feeder question into you, because we've had a lot of weather events. We have to deal with imperfect data, even if we have all the experience. How would you address emergency managers who are like, hey, we got the last weather event wrong, but still evacuate? How would you deal with that?
Well, okay, there's a couple of things on that. I was going to bring this up as well. So talk about weather. we went through the entire alphabet this year for name storms, right? So,
Twice.
I mean, it was a
Yeah.
crazy weather year. And yeah, I mean, the weather coming in, and our information is only as good as the models that are out there. I think the National Weather Service does a great job of doing what they do. And I mean, for that being said, I would defer to what their information is. We're making decisions based upon. It'd be great to have 80% of the information, but I think we're still sticking around like maybe 60% of accurate information coming in. And
yeah, that's a lucky number. Hopefully, that's a good number.
and that's
Seriously, 60 would be high right now.
Yeah, right. That's what I'm saying. That's kind of said,
Yeah.
kind of put it like this, and I would be, basically we're making the decisions based on this information, and yeah, sometimes you're gonna get it wrong, and I would rather err on the side of caution than say, oh, well, maybe we shouldn't evacuate because we're gonna, piss some people off, and then God forbid we have a Katrina again or something like that where people are stuck because we didn't make the right decision. And again, when we talk about evacuation, that's one of the things that we need to really take a look at the terminology that we're using, because we have like the mandatory and voluntary and all this kind of stuff. And I think if we can give more education to the public on what these mean, or if we change some of the verbiage just a little bit to where they go, okay, yeah, this means that they really fear you know this thing happening. But people are kind of weird, right? And I go back to this. We had a tsunami warning. We actually had a tsunami. It was a very small one. What I mean by small is that it was a minus like 1.5 foot tide at the time. At the beach, you could see it going in. I mean, subduction zone came in. The waves came back. It was causing issues. You definitely didn't want to have anybody in that water because they wouldn't be able to swim in it because it was like a washer machine. And instead of like when we put the tsunami warning out, instead of people leaving, people are driving in from like the Inland Empire in California because they wanted to see the. Yeah, I'm like, oh my god, if that was like a Indonesian tsunami, we would have had more deaths and stuff because people come down to the ocean to see the tsunami. So
just tell people it's radioactive. Seriously, like that. People think radioactive material is like contagious somehow. If we I was in 2011 with Japan with the Fukushima, and there was a lot of messaging put out about, okay, if you are contracted, but like if you have it in your system, like that's one thing, but if you touch somebody else, that's not going to be a problem. I just talked about that with another guy, Jason. Jason Clapp came on the show, and he works at a facility out there, and so we were talking about it, and like that was like a big thing. It was like in Brazil, an X-ray machine got damaged, and kids were playing with the material, and unfortunately they died. Yeah, and thousands and thousands of people went to go get checked because like cities over, and so like I think you're calling out what I've been trying to call out to, and you articulate it perfectly. It's like our messaging this year has been so abysmal. The messaging has been terrible, and emergency managers have to do better messaging. I remember I got my first job in DC 10 years ago, whatever it was, 15 years ago, and I remember that we were talking about occupant emergency plans, and the messaging that we went with our branch said we are going to have mustering locations. And I was like, there's no one in this facility who understands what mustering means. It's really basic for us. It's technically a Navy term, but like, hey, this is where you're supposed to meet. So our first evacuation, our test evacuation, because we did it twice a year as a federal agency, and we're like, all right, go muster over there. And people were like, what? And so we literally had some people cross the street and start going into the sandwich shop. And I was like, oh my gosh, they think we're talking about delicious foods and treats by talking about mustering. So, I'm like, hey, can we just like talk a little bit more about common denominator of like common language here for people, and I think we could. I think we could to definitely increase that for sure.
So we got to excuse me, man. We have to take a quick break, and when we come back, I want to address some of the comments, and then I want to talk a little bit more about messaging.
The Outer Limits Supply Company was founded on the idea of providing high-quality first aid kits. Their goal is to supply the life-saving equipment you'll need to mitigate the majority of injuries often seen during austere times. From a minor injury on an outdoor adventure with your family to your team responding to a major traumatic event, Outer Limits Supply has the kits to manage most situations, providing practical, user-friendly first aid kits that anyone can use. Enter EM Weekly, all capitals, at checkout and save 20% off your total purchase. Go to www.outerlimitsupply.com today. That's outerlimitsupply.com.
Seconds count during an emergency. That's why at Titan HST, we're always inventing new technology to help people stay safe and help people who can provide help get connected with people who need help. At Titan HST, we've deployed mesh networking, allowing emergency communication even when networks are down, augmented reality, and real-time translation. We believe in the power of people to help each other stay safe and thrive.
Hey everybody, I've been talking about VanQuest bags here since they became a sponsor, and I do love my VanQuest bag. I have a everyday carry bag over here. It's like a briefcase type thing with all this really great pockets and everything in there. But I also have one of their first aid bags that I put together. I took some of the gear that I got from Outer Limits Supply and I put it inside this bag. It's very bright. And then again, on the inside, when you open it up, check this out. It has this orange pockets on the inside, and you can see everything that's in there. It's really great, easy to use, great materials, and I love them. And actually, right now, if the holidays are over, but guess what? The discounts are still going in. If you use EM5 weekly, you get a 10% discount on your total purchase. So EM5 weekly at your checkout at vanquest.com, and let them know that we sent you. So thank you for listening to our sponsors, because without them, we could not bring you the quality content that we bring you. So John, messaging.
Sir.
So we got a couple comments over here that I'd like to address. So Eileen says, I'd like to that we have more access to raw data to look at an argument that we hear or seen from professionals from NOAA and so forth, is that the raw data is coming in. And so maybe, we have to talk a little bit about how do we digest, make, raw data and make that information into intelligence.
Yeah. So I would say that data is not information, and you can manipulate data. And from a purely analytical standpoint, we have to constantly validate where we get that data from. We see this all the time in the news. Going back to Hurricane Harvey, actually, I had the FCO, the federal coordinator, come up to me, and he was actually my team lead on the National IMO, and he was furious, and for good reason. He said, why in the heck did you send out these maps that show damage assessments on these homes? Like, these are, and he was going on and on and on about these damage assessments, and I was like, give me the map. And so I'm looking at this thing, and I'm like, we didn't create this. And so we went back, and we found from 2009, someone had basically taken an old damage assessment map of critical infrastructure, actually, and changed the titles to make it look like it was Hurricane Harvey, and posted that in the news there. And that was one of the big things, was like, damage assessments on FEMA are way off than what they're saying to the news. It's much better. Don't worry about it. And I said, I said to the team lead, I said, hey, this is showing, like, I don't know, 20,000 possible locations that were hit, we had 700,000 claims. And so, like, just validating that data is so important. And he did everything right. He saw this information. He saw this from a news outlet. He went right to the source. I would have been the guy responsible for it. And we were able to track down that information. And we have to fight that all the time. So the more we get raw data and we can validate those sources of data, it changes everything. And it shows why in a response, the federal government, the state, the counties, they all need to be using the same data source.
Mm-hmm.
Because once you start getting different information in or different data in, you have a problem. And so my thought process of disaster data is, if you're ever going to go to Congress to do a hearing, make sure that you can back up everything and say, hey, 26, 27 federal agencies are using this data. The state used this data. We validated it with universities, and you go on and on and on. And so, like, the more that we can validate beforehand so that we can trust that information in real time, and then as to your comment earlier, recognizing that, hey, that's still a 60% solution. We want to get up to 80% solution. 80% solution is enough. But in response, you might only have 10%.
Right.
Dams in Michigan, right? The dams in Michigan went at, I think, midnight, 2 dams in May,
Mm-hmm.
and they had to make a call very quickly. And luckily, they already had it in their plan that says, okay, if a dam goes, we're going to evacuate these 10,000 people, a quarter of the population. And they did, and they were able to get them out. But that was all pre-planning, and you have to make split-second decisions.
Absolutely. Daniel says he, even though he's not here with us today, he's still commenting. He says we need to standardize tiers and triggers and decision making instead of leaving it to an individual to make a decision based on politics of the situation in the midst of the incident or event. And yeah, I agree with that to a point. And the reason why I say to a point is I know that when we had some issues, especially with the H1N1, we didn't quite make the tier, if you will, to trigger what we're doing right now with COVID. But sometimes with tiers and triggers, you still have to have the ability to make a decision based upon what the ground is telling you, because we could have been right where we are now with social distancing and all this kind of stuff based on H1N1, and people would have lost their mind on that as well, because they just what they do, I guess.
Yeah, general public loses their mind. That's for sure. Hey, so like, this is my problem. Like, so that's a really good call out with the tiers and triggers. But I feel like emergency management inherently is that tie between tactics and not even strategic. It's like, it's just political. Like, we go in there and the first thing we have to do is talk to a governor.
Mm-hmm.
The first thing we have to do is, get these politicians on board. One, they have the legal authority to make those calls, and so we need them to be on board.
Right.
But two, if politics get in the way, not just the politicians, but politics get in the way, I mean, COVID is a prime example. One of the greatest lessons learned of 2020 is, as soon as a disaster becomes political, rather, as soon as a crisis becomes political, you have a disaster.
Absolutely.
And we have to pull way back from that. I think that's a big lesson.
Yeah, somebody asked me the other day, he goes, what's my biggest frustration? And I just said politicians, so true. And the thing is, and I have to give it to them a little bit, especially mayors, governors, their job is on the line, based upon, the outcome of disasters. I mean, take a look at Katrina, for instance. I mean, Ray Nagin lost his job. Blanco lost her job. The people were upset, say the least, that these things happened. But the problem is, well, yeah, that's
you're doing a great job, Brownie.
Yeah. He might be listening, so
hey, I hope he does. I'd love to talk to him.
No, I actually know Michael Brown. He's actually a pretty decent guy.
I heard he was, yeah.
And Michael, he kind of got. No, we'll talk about this offline. He kind of got screwed on this whole deal, but anyway,
but it's politics, right? I mean, politics get in the way of the job. So
absolutely, and that's the thing too is that politics do get in the way of the job, and so. it sucks that way, but I understand it in one aspect of it, but the other side of it is if they listen to us before an event, right? That's because that's the thing is they tend to not want to deal with emergency management until something happens and emergency management becomes, the focus, but they wouldn't listen to us or give us the budget and all those other kind of things associated with emergency management prior to a disaster. But man, oh man, we get put on the hot seat as soon as that disaster rolls around, so.
There was how do I say this? There was a location that I probably won't name, a county that was looking for an emergency manager. And at first I was fairly intrigued. This was, several years ago. And I looked at the recent disasters and they had made really, really poor calls. And they kept on throwing the people who were involved in that response under the bus, essentially, and firing them. And so I was like, I just knew that if I had, even taken that job, that could have happened to me. And I think that we have to be cognitive of that. I've said this before. Brock Long, one of the most savvy political minds of emergency management. He had to deal with a whole political climate that I don't think anybody wants to deal with. And the fact that he was able to keep his reputation and show that he still is a great emergency manager. I mean, he has checked all the boxes to be great and to deal with that political climate and to keep your career is a big deal. And I warn people about that all the time, especially young emergency managers. Like, you got to pick your fights. You got to know how to, you got to be a great coordinator. So politics. We can talk about politics all day. It's a big deal for our industry, and we have to focus so much more on it than I think this traditional, okay, I have the authority to do whatever I want. I was given this authority. Well, it could come back and bite you if you don't do it right.
Absolutely. No, it will bite you if you don't do it right. So, okay, a couple things I think I find interesting. Let's go through these really quick here. So, 2020 worldwide, not just here in the United States, worldwide has been crazy, right? So we talked about wildfires, plane crashes in Iran and Afghanistan and Pakistan. I mean, Kobe Bryant dies, right?
Dude, oh my gosh, that was this year.
Yeah, it was this year. Social unrest, right? I mean, with all the protests that are still going on, by the way, across the country, because of not just, I think, George Floyd, as much as people want to say that was the catalyst, I just think that was the excuse. I think everything else was there, and just George Floyd put everything over the top.
It was the match.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. What we didn't talk about was a crazy explosion in Beirut, right? I mean,
or in Tennessee.
Well, we'll get to that.
Crazy explosions, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the one in Beirut wasn't on purpose, for as far as I know. I don't think I think they've all decided that was an accident. That
was really stupid. It was stupid. Talk about messaging. Hey, let's not talk. It's not an accident. It was stupid. They stored this stuff for what was it? How many years was it? They had 4 or 5 years.
I think it was 6 years. Yeah, unstable.
Yeah, 6 years. Unstable ammonium nitrate, and it will go boom. I mean, we keep telling people if you don't store things right, that's what happened. Hazmat.
Talk about decision making, right? I mean, that was pulled off of a ship, basically because of process of policies, because didn't have the right manifesto or something along those lines. The ship owner said, "Screw it," it was cheaper for him to give it up than it was to fight it. And then they didn't know what to do with it after the ship's owner said, "Screw it, I don't want it." Right. Now all of a sudden they're like, "Oh, what do we do with all this stuff?" And they just stored it, and then bad decision making right there.
Yeah.
I mean, there's violence in India. Then we had earthquakes in Turkey and a locust swarm outbreak in East Africa, right? Sounds like
March.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Tornado. Yeah, we also had a tornado in Nashville. I don't know if you brought that one up.
Oh, yep. Yeah, we haven't got there yet. Yep, tornado in Nashville. I actually went. My sister and niece, they they moved to the Nashville area, and I went back over there. Some friends that I used to work with here in Orange County, and this was in September. I went back, and the what you call it there, the storm damage is still there. I mean, they're still doing the recovery, and it was just amazing to see what got destroyed along the way.
Yeah, people don't realize, like, once the news leaves, like, they think like, oh, you're now in recovery. It's a reason. The recovery takes 10 years for a reason. You can go up to Paradise right now, and there are demolished homes. They're still working to clear things out. I mean, it's a multi-year function to be able to get, back to, whatever you want to call normal.
Yeah. I mean, absolutely. And over there, the what do you call it there? The pieces of tin roof were still wrapped around telephone poles and trees and things. It's just amazing to see that destruction still there. And you're right, Paradise. I mean, heck, we still have buildings and stuff, or not buildings, vacancies where buildings used to be from the Whittier Narrows earthquake that happened in '87. It just never got rebuilt. Jeez. So I mean, this is, I mean, heck, go to Katrina still. I mean, there's the lower Ninth Ward is still devastated from that. So
I was there a couple years ago, and like, a big problem with them, again, talking about policy, is a lot of people had inherited. It's a really poor area, socioeconomic. It's just really tough there. And when you drive by plot after plot after plot, and we were talking to one of the residents, like, they just didn't have the paperwork. They had been there for 4 generations, and they couldn't prove that they had been there. And like, that's a real tragedy too. Of like, hey, my family's been in this one spot for 4 generations. I'm not making the argument that they should have rebuilt the Ninth Ward. I'm just talking about a policy issue that we have to address.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Talk about volcano that you said earlier. We had a volcano. We had 2 volcanoes this year. That went off. One was in the Philippines. The other one was just recently over in Hawaii.
Yeah, a couple days ago.
Yeah. And then, of course, we have the bombing of Nashville again. We're back to Nashville, and here's the thing about that. That's just like one of the most bizarre things that I've seen in my years. I mean, the guy goes out there. There's, at this point, there has been no messages from him, politically speaking. People want to call it terrorism, but it doesn't fit the bill of terrorism. That's the other thing too. We can talk about this for a bit. Terrorism, people not in our industry throw the term terrorism around like anything that bad happens. I say bad.
They did that in Colorado yesterday. Did you hear about Colorado?
No. Fill me in.
Yeah, 35 town of 3,500, a coordinated attack. That's what they're calling it. Activists went and basically destroyed the natural gas pipeline in the town, and so they were having a snowfall. They were having already 8 inches at that point, and then all of a sudden the gas went off, so no heat. So the town was basically scrambling to fix these 3 locations, and then they had to go and individually turn on the pilot lights at every single residence in that town, during freezing cold weather. So, immediately the town commissioner called it an act of terrorism.
John Fontaine says Aspen cut gas to the entire it was the entire town. So it was Aspen, Colorado. Well, I mean, that could be, that could be terrorism, right? That could fall into that because if there's a political message, or you're trying to influence people to make a political decision. I mean, that's terrorism. But like, I mean, the idea here of this bomb going off, crazy people doing crazy things, isn't terrorism. The high school shooters aren't terrorists unless they have a political message that goes along with it. and
Right.
or that was their intent, right? I mean, there has to be a terrorist intent to go along with it, but it's a terrible, terrible, terrible crime. It's a tragedy. It's everything that goes along with it. But we need, if we're gonna start calling things terrorism that aren't terrorism, we're gonna have to redefine what terrorism really is. So there's that.
That goes back to the whole messaging. I mean, John called it out, right? It was environment. It could be environmental terrorism, right? So like you can start to navigate that, but yeah, when you start using broad terms, words still matter, and we should constantly fight to both use that common denominator of that language and try to have the impact of those words, because to your point earlier, mandatory evacuation should mean something. It should mean you have to get out or you're going to be negatively impacted by this. And I think we start to become, when we start playing that political game again, that's when bad things happen. But you didn't talk about the most important thing in 2020. I'm really surprised by that. The most important thing that happened in 2020 is that Todd DeVoe and John Scardina met on the podcast. We got to talk about this stuff. So yeah, it's been a lot of fun. But
it's been a lot of fun. Yeah, we are at the a little bit over, but that's okay. Oh, John did say it was Earth First is the name of the terrorist organization that popped that. So that's interesting. So yeah, I mean, we're hitting the end here. I know that we went a little bit over today. Everybody, thank you so much for sticking with us. And the cool part about it is I'm actually going to be on John's podcast, Disaster Tough. So check him out as well. Thanks for pinch hitting for Dan today. He's a little bit under the weather, and
you got it.
yeah, I mean it's I miss his face though, man. A big burly fuzzy face that he has there. Dan, we'll hope you have a great new year, Dan, and I hope that you're feeling better. Everybody else out there, hey, happy new year to everybody. It can only get, well, I was about to say something probably wrong, but I was gonna say it can only get better.
Knock on wood moment. Oh my gosh. Do not say that.
I will take that back. That being said, I hope that it gets better next year. We're still going to be in the midst of COVID. It's not over just because New Year changes. I'd like to see how things go with the vaccine. We'll see how that runs. I have some friends right now that are already getting the vaccine. They say their arms are a lot sore than getting the flu shot. So there's that. And you got to get that twice. So that's going to be a lot of fun. And that being said, I really do thank everybody for being with us throughout the year, with EM Student and EM Weekly. I do this because you guys, right? And I do this for y'all. This is a community that we have here. We really built this emergency management community through podcasting. It's so great to be part of it. And I want to say thank you for letting me be part of your lives. And we'll see you next year. Stay healthy, stay hydrated.